Hello, everyone. Picture this, a teenage girl from New Zealand, far removed from the glittering capitals of fashion, suddenly finds herself on the covers of the world's most powerful magazines. Rachel Hunter was called the Kiwi Cinderella, the small-town girl who conquered international runways with little more than raw beauty and unshakable presence. At just 17, she was thrust into an industry that devoured youth and celebrated perfection. Yet Rachel did not merely survive it, she became one of its icons. She was adored, envied, and endlessly scrutinized, not only for her career, but also for her high-profile marriage to rock legend Rod Stewart. Behind the dazzling images, however, lay a woman whose story was far more complex, a journey marked by independence, reinvention, and the determination to define herself beyond the label of supermodel. Rachel Hunter was born in 1969 in Glenfield, a quiet suburb of Auckland, New Zealand. Her childhood was far removed from the glamour of fashion capitals. Instead, it was shaped by the rhythms of a small community, where everyone seemed to know each other and life unfolded at a slower pace. Her parents separated when she was still a child, and this early fracture left a mark on her. Rachel often described how the absence of a stable home life pushed her to grow up quickly. Raised mostly by her mother, she found herself caught between the innocence of youth and the responsibility of helping to hold a fractured family together. It was in this environment that her resilience first began to take root. As a young girl, Rachel was far from the polished figure the world would later know. She was tall, athletic, and full of restless energy. She loved to dance and dreamed, at one point, of becoming a professional ballerina. This passion for movement gave her a natural grace, though she was often self-conscious about her height and striking looks. In school, she stood out not always comfortably among her peers. There was also the shadow of vulnerability. Rachel was diagnosed with a rare blood disease as a teenager, which placed limits on her physical ambitions. The illness forced her to abandon her dream of ballet, a loss that cut deeply. Yet it also redirected her path. What had seemed like an ending became the opening to something entirely new. New Zealand in the late 1970s and early 1980s was a place where the world of high fashion felt distant, almost unreachable. International magazines would occasionally make their way into local shops, and Rachel, like many girls, leafed through them with fascination. But unlike others, she possessed a beauty that was undeniable. Even in a small-town setting, her golden hair, luminous skin, and statuesque figure caught the attention of those around her long before she understood the power of her own presence. Friends and family began to comment that she looked like a model, though Rachel herself was hesitant. She did not see glamour when she looked in the mirror. She saw a girl from Auckland with big dreams and quiet uncertainties. Yet those very insecurities gave her an authenticity that would later set her apart from the polished world she was about to enter. Her upbringing, marked by both hardship and quiet strength, gave Rachel Hunter something rare. She was not the product of privilege or elite connections. She was a small-town girl whose life would soon take her onto an international stage she could barely imagine. And it was precisely this contrast between the grounded girl from Glenfield and the global icon she would become that made her story unforgettable. Rachel Hunter's entry into modeling was almost accidental, a twist of fate that transformed a teenager from suburban Auckland into an international sensation. At just 16 years old, she was discovered by a local photographer who saw in her a face that could transcend New Zealand's borders. Rachel, however, was hesitant. Modeling seemed distant, even unreal, compared to the life she knew. She was still grappling with her illness, with the disappointment of having abandoned ballet, and with the ordinary concerns of adolescence. But the photographer's insistence planted a seed of possibility. Her first test shoot revealed something extraordinary. Rachel did not yet know how to pose like a professional, but the camera adored her. Her natural freshness, luminous skin, and athletic frame gave her a vitality that stood out. Unlike models who cultivated an aura of aloofness, Rachel radiated accessibility. She was beautiful, yes, but she also seemed approachable. the kind of woman others could relate to. That paradox, distant yet familiar, would later become her signature. Soon, she signed with a local agency, and within a year, her career took off faster than anyone expected. At just 17, she was whisked away to New York, a city that could devour young models as quickly as it created them. For Rachel, the transition was overwhelming. She had grown up in a quiet suburb, and suddenly she was walking into casting calls in skyscrapers, competing with girls from Paris, London, and Milan. The noise, the pace, the scrutiny. It was a culture shock, but what struck casting directors was her authenticity. Rachel did not yet know the tricks of modeling, but that innocence was refreshing. She was booked for editorials and catalog shoots almost immediately. Soon after, she was chosen for the cover of Australian Vogue, a moment that marked her arrival on the international stage. The girl who once dreamed of ballet now graced the pages of fashion's most powerful magazines. Yet her rise was not without resistance. Rachel's look, healthy, athletic, with a natural glow, was different from the ultra-polished aesthetic dominating the late 1980s. Some agents told her she was too wholesome or too commercial to ever become a true high-fashion star. But those very qualities would later set her apart, particularly in the United States, where the girl-next-door appeal had enormous cultural power. Her family watched from afar with a mix of pride and apprehension. Modeling was glamorous, yes, but it was also unforgiving. Rachel herself admitted in later interviews that she was often scared in those early years, scared of rejection, scared of being alone in a foreign city, scared of not measuring up. Yet beneath that fear was determination. Each shoot, each casting, each new country taught her resilience. The true breakthrough came when she was signed to Ford Models in New York, one of the most powerful agencies in the world. With that move, Rachel Hunter transitioned from a promising newcomer into a global contender. Campaigns began to pour in, and so did the attention. Her face appeared not only in high fashion spreads, but also in commercial campaigns that reached millions of households. One of her earliest defining moments was landing the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. For many models, this was the pinnacle of exposure, a ticket to international fame. Rachel's natural beauty, combined with her approachable charm, made her a perfect fit. The issue was a sensation, and suddenly the girl from Glenfield was a household name. Looking back, Rachel often said she never chased modeling as a dream. It was not something she planned, but something that unfolded around her. Yet her entry into fashion felt inevitable once it began. The shy teenager who had once doubted herself was now thrust into an industry that would not only embrace her, but also make her one of its defining faces. Her journey into modeling was not a straight path of discovery, it was a collision of chance, resilience, and timing. And from that moment, Rachel Hunter's life would never again belong solely to herself. By the early 1990s, Rachel Hunter had ascended into the rarefied circle of supermodels. What set her apart was not only her beauty but her accessibility, an image that resonated with millions. Her defining moment came in 1989 when she appeared on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. The image, radiant and natural, catapulted her into international stardom, unlike the distant, almost untouchable beauty of some of her contemporaries. Rachel's warmth connected with audiences. She became the woman who looked like a dream, yet felt real. The model who could bridge the fantasy of fashion with the relatability of everyday life. From there, her career exploded. She walked the runways for designers like Chanel, Gianni Versace, and Jean-Paul Gaultier, commanding the stage with her statuesque frame and unshakable poise. Her walk was confident but unforced, elegant without artifice. She was not the dramatic, edgy type. Instead, she carried a luminous charm that made clothes look alive. Magazine covers followed Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, and Cosmopolitan. Each cover was a statement of her versatility. She could embody high glamour one month, then the wholesome girl next door the next. Editors and photographers loved her adaptability, and brands flocked to her. Perhaps her most enduring association was with cosmetics and lifestyle campaigns. CoverGirl chose her as one of its ambassadors, making her face a constant presence in homes across America. The partnership cemented her status not just as a high fashion star, but also as a commercial powerhouse. She was one of the few models who truly straddled both worlds. What also made Rachel's rise unique was the global fascination with her personal life. Her marriage to British rock legend Rod Stewart in 1990 became a media frenzy. At just 21 years old, she married a man more than 2 decades her senior, and their relationship was splashed across tabloids worldwide. While some claimed the publicity boosted her career, Rachel had already established herself as a model of international standing. The marriage simply amplified her visibility, turning her into a household name far beyond fashion. But beneath the public spectacle, her career achievements spoke for themselves. She appeared in multiple Sports Illustrated issues, an honor that few models repeated. She became one of the most photographed women of her era, with images that defined the look of the 1990s. Rachel Hunter's peak was not defined by a single campaign or a single runway. It was defined by her consistency, her ability to remain both glamorous and relatable, and her instinct for reinvention. She was a supermodel who did not intimidate. She invited the world in. And in doing so, she carved out a place in fashion's golden age that remains hers alone. Rachel Hunter's career thrived because she never fit neatly into the industry's boxes. In an era when many models were pressured to embody a cold, unattainable glamour, she offered something different: authenticity. She was radiant but never untouchable, glamorous but always grounded. This balance was her rebellion against fashion's rigid ideals. From the beginning, she resisted the stereotype of the aloof supermodel. Rachel smiled in photographs when others were told to stay icy. She embraced her athletic frame when the industry leaned toward ultra-thin silhouettes. At a time when heroin chic was becoming the standard, Rachel represented health, vitality, and natural beauty. She refused to starve herself to match the trend. Her body was not a compromise, it was a statement. Her candidness also set her apart. Unlike models who carefully maintained mystique, Rachel spoke openly about her struggles. She discussed her teenage illness, her self-doubt, and even her discomfort with being thrust into sudden fame. These confessions made her relatable to women who often felt alienated by the fashion world. Rachel did not present perfection, she presented humanity. She also pushed back against the idea that models had to remain silent or voiceless. In interviews, she challenged the industry's obsession with youth and unrealistic standards. She reminded audiences that beauty was not confined to one size, one age, or one skin tone. Her later projects, including the reality TV series Rachel Hunter's Tour of Beauty, directly confronted these ideals by exploring global definitions of beauty beyond Western standards. Another way Rachel challenged norms was through her personal choices. Her marriage to Rod Stewart placed her under relentless public scrutiny, yet she refused to be defined solely by that relationship. When the marriage ended, she did not retreat into anonymity. Instead, she reinvented herself, pursuing acting, television, and advocacy. She showed that a model's life could expand beyond the runway, breaking the unwritten rule that beauty had an expiration date. Even her public image contradicted expectations. Rachel was a supermodel who was also a mother, navigating the dual pressures of career and family. At a time when motherhood was often seen as incompatible with modeling, she embraced it openly. This defiance broadened the cultural conversation about what women could be. Her difference lay not only in what she did, but in what she refused to do. She refused to compromise her health, refused to live by silence, and refused to allow others to dictate the boundaries of her career. By staying true to herself, Rachel Hunter proved that individuality could be as powerful as conformity. In the end, her greatest rebellion was simple but profound. She reminded the world that beauty is not a mask, but a reflection of authenticity, and that truth made her unforgettable. At the height of her fame, Rachel Hunter seemed untouchable, a global supermodel, a CoverGirl ambassador, a Sports Illustrated icon, and the young wife of a rock legend. But behind the luminous images, life was far more complicated. Her marriage to Rod Stewart, which had captured worldwide fascination, soon became a source of strain. She was just 21 when they wed, while he was more than 2 decades older. The age gap and Rod's reputation as a womanizer made their relationship the constant target of tabloids. For Rachel, the scrutiny was suffocating. She had achieved stardom in her own right, yet much of the press reduced her identity to being Rod Stewart's wife. By 1999, after nearly a decade together and 2 children, the marriage collapsed. The divorce was public, messy, and painful. Rachel found herself in headlines not for her work, but for her personal struggles. While Rod quickly remarried, Rachel faced the challenge of redefining herself outside of the media circus. Her career, too, had begun to shift. By the late 1990s, the fashion industry was obsessed with younger, edgier faces. The supermodel era was fading, replaced by a new generation of waifish, grunge-inspired figures. Rachel's wholesome beauty, once celebrated, was suddenly labeled too commercial or outdated. She was no longer the face designers chased. There were attempts to pivot. She pursued acting roles, appearing in films and television series. But Hollywood, like fashion, proved ruthless. Offers were sporadic, and she was often cast in roles that played off her image rather than challenged it. Critics were unkind, and the transition never fully matched the success she had enjoyed in modeling. She also battled personal disappointments. Rachel spoke candidly about struggling with confidence after her divorce, admitting that the constant spotlight on her private life left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. The glamorous image she projected to the world often clashed with the reality of raising 2 children alone while trying to maintain a career. By the early 2000s, Rachel Hunter had largely disappeared from the front lines of fashion. She still appeared occasionally in magazines and campaigns, but the era of her dominance was over. For many, she became a nostalgic figure, remembered for her iconic covers, but absent from the contemporary scene. And yet, her story was not one of scandal or collapse. It was one of quiet resilience. She never spiraled into self-destruction, though the industry and the tabloids gave her every reason to. Instead, she withdrew, regrouped, and later reinvented herself on her own terms. But in the eyes of the fashion world, her disappearance was striking. A woman who once embodied vitality had been eclipsed, left to navigate life beyond the lights. The silence of her absence left fans wondering how could someone so luminous, so visible, vanish from fashion's stage so quickly. The answer lay not in failure but in the unforgiving nature of an industry that constantly demands the next new face. Rachel Hunter's legacy is not defined by her disappearance from fashion, but by the mark she left during its golden era. She was one of the few models who bridged the gap between high fashion and commercial success, gracing the runways of Paris, while also becoming a familiar face in homes worldwide through Sports Illustrated and CoverGirl campaigns. Her story reminds us that beauty is not just about perfection, but about authenticity. She showed that a model could be radiant and relatable at the same time, that glamour could coexist with humanity. For women who saw themselves excluded from the icy world of high fashion, Rachel offered an image of vitality and warmth. Beyond the runway, her openness about personal struggles, motherhood, and reinvention has made her enduringly relevant. Through her television work and her candid interviews, she challenged the idea that a model's value fades with youth. Instead, she embraced maturity as another chapter of beauty. Today, when conversations about diversity, authenticity, and aging in fashion are louder than ever, Rachel Hunter's journey feels prophetic. She was a reminder that no industry can define a woman's worth unless she allows it. Perhaps the real question is not why Rachel left the stage, but why the stage was so unprepared for women like her, women who dared to be both icons and individuals. Maybe she was never gone. Maybe we simply forgot to keep looking.